All right, so we want to talk about data. We want to talk about, make sure that everybody knows recording is in progress, right? You will be, this could show up on the internet, so be careful how you treat your teacher, right? But we're going to talk about data, and like I said, specifically, I want to give you guys kind of a run through of Microsoft Excel. We might look at Google Sheets as well, since that's completely free to use if you've got a Google account. But the point is, we live in a world that is just, you can't even calculate the amount of data that's being stored out there, right? I mean, there's so much data, so much information that's being stored. I looked up the number before I came to class, and the current estimates, which is a sum of the data that the Big Four, what they call the Big Four, store. The current estimates, and that's Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook, okay, is that they store approximately 1.2, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it this way because I don't know how to. What they actually said was 1,200, and I don't know if it's petabytes or petabytes. It's PETA bytes, right? So 1,200 petabytes, and that is 1.2 million terabytes of data, right? So if you've got a 1 terabyte drive on your machine, 1.2 million terabytes of those drives, right, is the amount of data that's stored for just the Big Four. And so that doesn't even take into account companies like Dropbox, who all Dropbox does is store data, right? So there's still huge amounts of data out there that we're not even calculating into that number. So it's just a mind-boggling amount of data, right? And so, when you're using your computer, that stuff's all being, when you're on the internet and you're surfing the internet, they're storing that information somewhere. And what's the big drive behind storing all of that data? You guys know what typically what the point is when you're surfing on your browser and they want to know all of this information about your surfing habits. Do you know why they're tracking that?
They see what you look at and like, so they can advertise.
Exactly. It's advertisement, right? It's all about presenting the products in front of to you that we're hoping that you're going to buy, right? That's really what gathering that information is all about. And I know, because I used to work because of working for Turner Broadcasting for so many years. I mean, that's how these TV companies make their money, right? It's all about advertising. That's why you began to see several years ago things like, you would have a movie, and not just you would have an advertisement at the beginning of the movie that might advertise Coca-Cola, but you would actually have a scene where the character actually drinks a Coca-Cola, right? So these companies are paying millions of dollars, right, to insert their products into these TV shows or into these movies. Like I was just like the first Iron Man movie. I was thinking about this the other day. If you guys have seen that, when he gets back from being in captivity or whatever, he says, "I want an American cheeseburger," and then it shows him eating a Burger King cheeseburger. And it's like, if I'm away and I'm coming back to pick a cheeseburger that I've been missing, and I've got all the money that Tony Stark had, I'm not going to pick Burger King, right? So why did he pick Burger King? Well, because that's who paid for the advertisement, that movie, right? So it's all about those. It's all about getting people to buy your product. And so that's why that's the emphasis behind a lot of the storing of this data. And so there's a lot of garbage that takes place as a result of that. And it makes sense, because, the scripture says that the root of all kinds of evil is the love of money. And so at the end of the day, that's kind of what's going on behind the scenes there. They're trying to figure out what you're doing so that I can push my product to you, because you're a likely candidate for buying my product, right? So they're just storing terabytes of data, trying to figure this out. And then they're analyzing that data. They're figuring out which ones are most likely to purchase. And so if you happen to go to the Toyota website, now I'm going to feed you a Chevrolet advertisement next time you visit this website or whatever, because I think you're in the market to buy a vehicle, And so the kind of the branch of computer science that handles the analyzing and the storing of all this data, we refer to that in the general term big data, right? So we use big data as to basically talk about the field that deals with handling all this vast amount of data and making informed decisions based on that data, right? Because there are companies that specialize in nothing but analyzing that information. Just before I left Turner, we had made like We had actually started a whole new department that was focused specifically on that, and purchased some, really high priced software that was going to help us analyze all this terabyte of data. And just specifically so ads could be pushed out on the digital platforms and on the television platforms and all that kind of stuff. There's one thing though that I want to mention. As smart as man thinks he is in gathering all of this data, and knowing what people are doing and being able to track all that information. And again, it is being tracked, right? One of the things that I've reminded my kids often is that whatever you do on the internet, that information is stored somewhere, right? Somebody is storing that somewhere. I don't care if you think you can use some kind of tool to hide it, right? I'm using the incognito window or whatever, my browser. That information is being stored somewhere. And the police use it, right? When they're going back and they're trying to find out what's on someone's computer, that stuff it's being recorded somewhere. So just be careful what you do, right? But ultimately, the reason that we should be careful what we do is why? Even if we think we're hiding it from the government or from the police, who sees it? God sees it, right? And so really the master of recording data is the Lord, right? And so I wanted to make this, wanted to read this verse here. And it's because God is everywhere, right? He is so much higher than us. It says his thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are not our ways. There's no place that we go that he's not there. And so this is a pretty sobering verse when you think about the preserving of data, and God does it better than anybody. It says, this is Matthew 12, 30, 35 and 36. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. And it's talking about those treasures of the heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, it says in the previous verse. And so some have good treasure in their heart, and that manifests itself outwardly. Others have evil treasure in their heart, and that manifests itself outwardly. But he makes this very sobering statement after this. This is Christ speaking here. He says, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. It's a pretty powerful thought, right? When you think about just, I wasn't even thinking when I said what I said, right? I just made that statement. You ask somebody, you see somebody you haven't seen in a while or whatever, or you just encounter someone on the street and you're like, hey, how's it going? Beautiful day today. Just kind of, you're just trying to make conversation. You're not really thinking about it, just a careless word, but we will give an account for every careless word we speak. It says, for by your words, you will be justified, and by your words, you will be condemned. So I thought about that as we thought about all this data that's being saved and recorded. There are certain things, certain information they can't get about us. There are thoughts that are going on in our mind, right? There are things that are sitting in our hearts, but God knows all of that. So live your life with the awareness that God knows that information down to every careless word. Pretty sobering, isn't it? What's the best thing that we can do about that? If we start thinking about, man, God knows every careless word that I've spoken. God knows the thoughts of my heart. What is it that all of us should immediately think when we consider that? Man, I'm in a lot of trouble, right? I mean, if I've heard someone use that example before, if I was walking around with a TV screen and everything that I thought was displayed on that TV screen for everybody to see, I would run and hide in my closet, right? Because I don't want people to know what's going on in my mind. I don't want people to know the wicked thoughts that race across my mind at times. Even if I fight against it and say, I don't want to think that, right? Still, it was there. And it's a revelation of just the fact that man is fallen in sin, right? We're born captive to sin, the scripture says. So what's the solution? When we think about that we're going to give an account of every careless word, what hope do we have? Because I've had a lot of careless words that I don't want to be repeated, and I don't want to be remembered, and yet God remembers them. What can I do about that? There's only one solution. It's forgiveness. And how do I find forgiveness? How is forgiveness possible? because of Jesus Christ, what he's done, right? Because of his death on the cross. Remember, God is too just to just sweep sin under the rug. He can't just say, I know you thought that wicked thought. I know you had that wicked intent. You know, even if you didn't actually do it, even though you didn't murder that guy, you had hatred in your heart, and I consider that to be murder, right? That's what Jesus said. Even though, you know, you didn't commit that lustful act, but you had lust in your heart, so you're just as guilty before me of the lustful act. That's what Jesus said. And so God can't just sweep that under the rug. Sin has to be paid for, but that's what the cross was all about, right? Jesus died on the cross to pay for sin. And so those that repent, that confess their sin and trust in him, he pays that debt. So that's the hope that we have. So the sobering thought of, I'm going to give an account of every careless word, should drive us to the cross, should drive us to repentance, right? Should drive us to seek life in Jesus Christ. And God promises that I will forgive. And he says their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. So he like completely removes them. That's an amazing thought, that we can stand before God blameless with all the sinful things that I've done in my life, right? That I can be made that righteous. And that's how good of a job Jesus has done. All right. So before we move into spreadsheets, any questions about just data in general, big data, what that concept is? Again, big data just has to do with the mounds and mounds and mounds of information out there. And so that's the kind of the branch of computer science where they're focused on analyzing and storing, you know, making sense of all that humongous amount of data. So let's talk about Excel. And I'm going to try to launch this here. It was given me, this was originally my son's computer. And so I'm getting warnings about needing to log in and verify your subscription. So I'm hoping it's not going to bomb out on me. We'll have to go to Google if it does. But this is Microsoft Excel. And I just want to walk through some of the features, because Excel is an excellent tool for storing your own data, right? If you've got small amounts of data, compared to the terabytes that we were just talking about, right? Excel is a great tool for storing that information. And I use Excel all the time for storing. I use it for storing passwords. It'll let you password protect your spreadsheet, and it'll let you hide certain cells so that you can't see those cells. So I use Excel for that because I feel more comfortable using that for storing my passwords than some sort of online service that I'm going to get an email about saying, hey, there's been a data breach and everybody's got your passwords, you know. So I store on myself on here. You can use it for whenever I bought my first house. I used Excel and the formulas that were in Excel to understand what my amortization schedule was. So I could see right away when I make this house payment, if I put another $50 into my payment, this is how much money it's going to save me over the life of my loan. And that's a good thing to do, especially with like a home loan, because typically you're financing your home initially for like 15 to 30 years, you know, so you're paying interest for a long time, and most of that interest happens up front. And so it was kind of exciting to be able to punch that number into Excel and say, man, I just saved myself $1,000 you know, over the life of my loan by just putting $50 in now, something like that. So there's all kinds of cool ways that you can use it. I use it for storing information about student attendance, right? Student grades. Of course, there's online tools for that, but for personal things that I want to keep up with, I use Excel for that. So if you look at Excel, when it first opens up, it just looks like a big grid, right? That's exactly what it is, just a grid, a grid of multiple boxes on there. When you look at each of these things across the top here, these are referred to as columns in Excel. And unlike, are you done with this information? Can I delete it? Can I delete it? This is my computer programmer coming out at me. Unlike, you know, when I walked you guys through Photoshop, I said I wasn't going to quiz you on Photoshop specifically, because most of us didn't have Photoshop, right? And Photoshop's not free. That is not going to be the case with spreadsheets, because the things that we're going to be going over are going to apply to pretty much any spreadsheet tool that you use, right? And so when I'm talking about columns and rows and distinctions and things like that, I want you to understand what I mean, because this works exactly the same way, like I said, on something like Google Sheets. Let me pull that up and just show it to you real quick. So if you have a Google account, if you go over here to your little, I don't remember what they call this little thing with the 9 dots on it, but if you pull up your Google menu, that you'll see Sheets as one of the options in there, and that's their tool for making spreadsheets. So I created a Huffman tree stats as I was doing the as I was working on the Huffman tree assignment that I gave you. And I listed my letters in there, and I counted the number of times that they were used. And so we'll walk through this hopefully before the end of class, and just kind of show you what formulas I use to kind of get these numbers. I didn't enter all this in manually. I let the spreadsheet figure some of this stuff out for me, right? But you see, this looks almost identical to what we have in Excel. Very similar. Because all spreadsheets work basically the same, right? We've got the concept of columns in here as well. So I can click on this and I can see that's column A, column B, column C. So there's columns across the top. And then as you go down the side here, you have rows. That's what we call those, right? And same thing in Excel. I can click on those. They're labeled 1, 2, 3. So you'll notice the columns are, this is spreadsheets. Columns identified by letters. Rows by numbers. And so, you know, you're like, well, what do you do whenever you hit the end of the alphabet? Well, if I scroll over here to the right and I get down to where I reach Z, then it starts with double A, double B, right? So it starts duplicating letters, not double A and double B, double A, AB, AC, right? Goes through all of those, and then it'll do BA, BC, and so forth. So lots of different lots of columns you could have in your spreadsheet. So we've got all these boxes, we've got columns, we've got rows. What we call an individual box, does anybody know? Right, so an individual box it's called a cell in a spreadsheet. So I heard both Daniel and Levi, I think. So we refer to the boxes as cells. And when you're identifying a cell, you always put the column name first and then the row name, right? So this top left column would be what? A1, right? I'm in top left cell. Top left cell is A1. Right? You guys thought it was the name of a steak sauce, but in fact, it's the top left cell in a spreadsheet. Maybe that's where they got the name of steak sauce. I always wondered that, you know? Maybe they were heavy spreadsheet users. They're like, it's a cool name for steak sauce. That's got to be it. Probably, right? Yeah, I just figured that out, just came to me. And in these cells, the cells can contain different types of data, and the spreadsheet needs to understand what type of data it is. Now, spreadsheets typically, sort of by default, they try to figure out what data you're entering in it, right? So if I enter in a word, you know, if I want to make this a, let's see, we're gonna do the ages of everybody that's in here, right? It makes a best guess at the information that I put in there and says that that's text, and tries to auto recognize the type of data that it is. And then if I put a number in there, I'll do my age first. We'll see if there's anybody older than I am. Yeah, okay, so 51, 52. I could tell you were a little Yeah, 53. Wow. Okay. Let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. There we go. So let's do our ages real quick. What you got, Braden? 14.
17.
17.
14.
14.
14.
14.
Or 14.
Or 14. One or the other. Okay. Man, I had no idea we had so many 14s in here. So let's put our, we're going to do ages, and then we'll just do age, not plural. Age, name. Oops. Come on, name. Notice as I'm typing in here, it also shows up top here. You guys see that? So I could type in either box, right? If I type in here, it's reflected in my box down there. So either one will work. But if I just click on it and start typing, it will erase what's there. So I have to, if I'm actually in the cell and I want to not overwrite what's there, I have to double click, and then I can back up and do whatever I want. But name, so this is going to be Jamie, Braden, Levi, Daniel, Christian, and Mason. All right, so notice all of the text information is left aligned. Do you guys see that? So it's on the left side here. Age is way over here on the left side, but the numbers are over on the right side. So that's just kind of a quick visual way that you can look at it and say, okay, this is a different type of data than we have here. But just wanting to point out that the cells can contain text information. Cells can hold numbers, text, and then also formulas. That's the type of data that it typically holds. And these are formulas for performing calculations, right? So formulas for calculations. That is not how he put it in the book. Let's see how it was he listed it in the book. He said, a label, a constant, or a formula. So he referred to the text as a label and numbers as a constant. And so I understand why he's saying that, because if we got text in there, typically we're labeling that portion of the spreadsheet. The numbers are constants that we enter in, but it's a little confusing to me to state it like that, because sometimes I will put a formula in there and the result of the formula is a number. And so really the type of data that's stored in that column, it is a formula, but it results in a number, which isn't really a constant. It can change based on some of the other values on the spreadsheet. So I think of them as numbers, text, and then formulas is what you can enter in there. And so we've got this information here with our ages on it. There are also built-in functions that you can use to do calculations. So these so all spreadsheets are going to have are going to offer built-in functions. For processing data. And he's actually got a chart in the book on page 91 that shows you some common functions that are available. Again, these are going to be, let me see if I can put this here so the people on the that are watching the video later can maybe see it. He's got average, min, max, count, sum, if. There's you can do conditional statements on there. So there are some some functions that are listed there. And so just to do one real quick, let's say, for example, I've got this range here, and I want to add all of those together and see what the sum is of all of our ages, right? So I can do down here, I can use the sum function. Excel gives you this auto sum option. So if I just click auto sum here, it tries to figure out and say, oh, you must be talking about these cells of numbers above this column. And so it defaults to that. And I can hit enter, and it tells me instantly that the total of all of our ages is 123. Man, you guys, some of you guys are old for that to be a number that big. It's crazy. Mason, you really skewed our numbers here with the 53. So 123 is our total, and we figured that out very quickly. You see how easy that was in a spreadsheet. We were able to very quickly use in one of the built-in functions to determine that value. So built-in functions are one of the powerful features there. And that kind of coincides with formulas. You're using these functions inside of the formula.
And now you could change one of those cells above it and it would change that.
That's right. So come June, once I change to 51, I would update that to 51, and immediately it's turned to 124, right? So that's the powerful thing about functions. As those constant numeric values, or they don't even have to be constant numeric values, but the numeric values that sum is based on, anytime those change, then the sum will be updated to reflect that, right? So there's also a bunch of formatting options that you can do, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because I do want to dig more into the functions and the formulas. That's really the power of the spreadsheet. But like I could select this entire region here, and or I could select an individual cell, and I can look at, and I can right click on that, and that gives me some of the formatting options. So down here, there's a format cells option. I could go down here to format those cells, or with the cells selected, there are some formatting options that are just listed for us up top here, right? It looks very much like a word processor. If I click B, all of those would now be bolded, right? All of that text would be bolded. Typically, like in the kind of table scenario like this, I'm only going to bold probably the headers, right? So I could highlight just my header area and say that's going to be bold. And maybe down here where I've got this total, maybe I also want that to be bold as well. So I could do that. Lines, some kind of lines around your data are useful. So I could click this here and do a drop down that says I'm going to put borders on everything. So if I click this here, now all of a sudden I've got borders around all of my cells. And so if I printed this guy out now, those borders would show up. By default, when you print in Excel, it doesn't maintain these grid lines that are there. So if you ever print it and you're like, well, why is it just on a white piece of paper? That's why. There is an option when you go to print, and I don't know if this is going to bomb on me because I don't have a printer available to me now, but you see what it looks like? All the rest of the spreadsheet's white. Only the areas that I specifically put my borders around shows up. There is an option here. Where is it? Portrait, normal, no scaling, page setup. Maybe it's here. Yeah, under page setup, I can say for the sheet, print my grid lines. And once I do that, now, well, if I were to print it, I would see all the grid lines as well. But I think it only shows the grid lines for the data that's there. So let me go back real quick here and remove the formatting that we just did. So is there no border? There we go. So we've removed that formatting. So now if I go to print, yeah, because I have, because on my page setup, I chose for the sheet to print grid lines, they show up. If I uncheck that, that's the way it would normally show up. So I don't usually print grid lines. I like to just kind of format the stuff myself because I like to do things like, I'll put a border around everything. All borders, and then like just around the outside of the table, let me right click here and go to format cells. For my border just around the outside of the table, I'll choose a thicker border, and I'll say do that just an outline of the whole thing. So now the whole thing's got a thicker border around the outside of it. And then maybe on my header section, I also want the same thicker border. So I've got the darker one set. I can either choose outline here to say outline that whole thing, or I can click down here and that'll just highlight that region. And that gives me the option of also making a strong border in the middle there as well. So now those have the stronger borders. And I'm gonna do the same thing down here. Let's see, whoops, I need to right click, format cells, and we'll put a border there as well, a darker border there. So you can play around with that, some of the formatting stuff. Of course, you can change colors, right? If I want all of the names here to be, maybe I want to use a different font, right? I can choose a different font. I can choose a different color. We'll make all those like a blue color there. So all kinds of formatting options. If you've used word processors, you'll be familiar with most of that. The thing that's going to be unique to this is going to be the formatting that's probably related to the grids, right? So as you're going in there and messing around with formatting, those are the types of things that that's going to be unique because you can define borders for that. There's of course alignment options. Maybe I don't like the fact that it takes my text here and puts it over on the left-hand side. Maybe I like my text to be on the right-hand side, just like the numbers are. So I could choose that, select that, and choose go right. Or more often with headers, a lot of times you want those centered, right? So I could center my headers there. So that's kind of some of the formatting stuff. I could say format cells, protection. Here's the stuff where you make things hidden. So I could say this is hidden. And it only is actually hidden when I then lock my spreadsheet. So under review here, I can go to protect sheet and I can give a password for my spreadsheet. And once I enter that password in and save my document, you will not be able to view the information. That's actually not true. Let me show you this real quick. If I protect my sheet and give it a password, I'm gonna tell you guys my super secret password of test right here. That is not the password that I use on my password spreadsheet. So, but if I do that, see, you can still see. Did I define these as being locked? Let me see. Formats. Oh, I'm already locked. I need to unprotect it. Sorry. Just by default, when you enter a password, it won't let you. Change anything once it's locked. So if I choose this again and I go to format cells. And it shows us hidden. It wasn't fully. So I'm gonna also choose, I'm gonna black all this stuff in, make it black. Of course, I need to also make the text black or you'll be able to see the text. So if I do that, now I can't see the data that's there, but if I click on them, look, it still shows up top here. I can still see that's Jamie. I can still see that's Braden. And even if I lock it, if it happened to be, if I lock it, I can't really click around there. So locking would be one way to do it, but actually locking is what you have to do. It's because I've got this defined as hidden. So now if I go to review, protect sheet, and then I enter in my super secret password of test, TST. Now if I try to click back in here, see, it won't show it to me up top. It'll let me click in the cells, but it won't show me the information up here. If I click on one that's not hidden, then it still shows me the information up top. So that's kind of how I handle that on my spreadsheet, right? So those are locked down. Again, that's kind of beyond what we were talking about here, but I just wanted to show you that. So while we're in here, so let's kind of back out. Let's see how much it'll let me do. Probably not much. Let me show that data again. Protection, we want it not hidden now, and we want no color. So there's all of our names. There are sorting options that are really handy in spreadsheets. So I could select all of this and I could say I want to sort just that data there under my data tab, and I want to sort it, and I want it to be sorted from I want to sort by column A, which is labeled actually. Oh, it's 50. I've only selected the part where 50 and Jamie is. So I'm going to sort by the column that has 50 at the top. And instead of going from largest to smallest, which isn't even quite how we have it here, but I'm going to go from smallest to largest. All right. So if I do that, it resorts it. What just happened? Oh, you know what? It counted that top part as a header. So let me do this. I need to do all of these. Try it one more time. data, sort. So now my column is going to be the age column. And the reason that did that is because I said my data has headers. That checkbox is checked over here. So it'll ignore the headers when it does the sort. So now we'll resort it again. And so it sorts them from smallest to largest. But notice it didn't affect my total down here. My total still works. This is the technique that I used when I was building my Huffman tree. I used the sort. I entered my stuff into the spreadsheet. I went through, I told you guys I did it over here on the Google sheet. I entered in all of my letters, and I entered in what the number of times that those letters were used. And then I used the spreadsheet to sort all of that data from largest to smallest, right? So I could more easily build my Huffman tree off of that. And then after I'd built my tree, I came in here and wrote what the binary values were. And then I use this cool technique where you begin to use formulas. And so I'm gonna flip over to the, it works the same way in Excel, but I'm gonna flip over to the Google Sheets one now. The way that you identify a formula is it will begin with the equal sign, okay? And so let's just say for whatever reason here, escape that, for whatever, if you ever get in that kind of weird scenario where it's like I'm getting these dotted lines and I don't know what it's trying to do and I don't want to do what it's trying to do, just hit the escape button and that'll get you back out of that. But let's say for whatever reason right here in this cell, I want the data that is in cell A1 to appear right there. All right. And so the way that I do that is I'll use a formula. Formulas always begin with equals. And then I say, I want the data in A1 to appear in this cell. So I just type in A1. And when I hit enter, letter, which was in the A1 cell, now appears there. Now, what do you notice is different about it?
It's not bolded.
It's not bolded, right? It's not centered like it is in the other one. That's because the formatting options are specific to the cell and that's not copied over in the formula. So I'd have to format this particular cell here if I wanted it to look exactly like the other one. But the raw data is there, right? The label or the text data got copied over. And so that's just how a formula basically works. If I, for example, knowing that column B2 and B3 are numbers, if I wanted to add those two numbers together here, if that's what my formula did, then I could say, take the information in B2 plus B3, and now give me what that answer is. And so it just did 7 and 16 here, combined those together and told me the answer was 13. Yes?
Is there a way that you could make the format go like either along with it or
To copy over in the formula? I've never tried that, to be honest with you. Not that I know of offhand, but there may be some sort of built-in function that I could wrap around the whole thing that says when you do this procedure here on this column or whatever, copy it over. But it would be hard for something like this, because what if you had multiple cells in there and the formatting was different? Like, how does it know which formatting to pick? So that's probably why it sort of stays away from that in the
if you do have like 2 rows of numbers and you put next to it, add this plus this, and then copy that down,
right?
It will change it so that it's doing each individual row.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I did here. So let me show you, just if that didn't make sense to you, let me show you guys what he's talking about here. So so when I wrote down my binary versions of each of my letters in my Huffman tree, then I wanted this column here to be the number of bits that was used for that letter. Well, I could go in there and I could count it myself and say it's 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5. I could do that. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger here. Can I make this one bigger? Let's see what happens. Yeah, there we go. So I could do that, right? I could have manually written down a 3, but look what I did instead. Instead, I used a formula, which I know is a formula because it starts with equals. And then I used the built-in function, the length function. And what the length function does is it takes a string and it counts how many characters are in that string, okay? So what I'm saying here is run the length function on cell C2, which is this cell right here. And so it count the number of characters in that string, and it came up with a total of 3. All right. And so then what I was able to do was just take that same one. Let me clear all this out. How do you clear? in Excel, I can just right click there and clear that out. Let me see if I just delete. Am I gonna have to do this? All right, I'll just do those there. So if I take this cell, which is length of C2, so it's taking the length of the cell right next to it, and I copy that, Control C, and then Control V right here, the spreadsheet is smart enough to go, okay, he doesn't want me to take the length of C2, he wants me to take the length of C3, the next row down. All right, and so this one's the length of C2, this one's the length of C3. Now I could copy both of these and copy it down here, and it figures it out automatically. He wants the length of C4 and he wants the length of C5. Then I could copy all 4 of those and paste it down here, and it figures it out. He wants the length of C6, length of C7, right? And so on and so on. And so it's kind of cool like that. You could take that cell and copy it, and it'll copy your formula in there, but it adjusts it based on what it thinks what you want the cell to be updated to be, right? So it's a handy way to kind of to copy that formula information around. And then finally, I needed to know what the total bits were that were used. And the way that I figured that out is the number of times that letter was used. E showed up 7 times. And when after I did the compression, E was equal to used up 3 bits, right? And so 7 times 3 will tell me the total number of bits that were used by the letter E. And so what this column here does is say, take my B2 column, my B2 cell, I'm sorry, this one here, and multiply it times my D2 cell. And that value is 21. Now notice D2 contains a formula, right? But that's fine. It's just looking at the value that's there, and these are automatically updated. If I were to change this to 8, my 21 should become a 24. And so I change that, and sure enough, it does. See? So that's kind of a quick overview. It's a lot of powerful stuff, that's going on there. There are charts that are built into this as well that you could do. Both Google and Excel have the charts that are in there. Let me make this a little bit smaller. I could add a chart real quick here and just say I want to put a bar chart on here, and my column, the column for my chart is going to be column B. Wait a minute, sorry. The type of chart, I'm just going to do just a bar chart, and probably my range here. So I want to go just here. Whoops. Here to here. So automatically figures that out. It's B2 to B17. And so I say, okay. And when I do that, it shows me a bar chart of all of the numbers that are in that particular row, right? So lots of powerful stuff. I mean, I've literally just scratched the surface, right?